The sun had just begun to rise, casting a gentle glow over the suburban neighborhood. Trevor, a man who had long grown accustomed to the rhythm of his daily routine, woke up to the soft warmth of the morning light filtering through the curtains. He stretched lazily, taking in the quiet of the house. Everything seemed perfectly normal. Beside him, his wife Jade was still asleep, her face serene, lost in peaceful slumber. Trevor couldn't help but smile at the sight of her, the woman he had spent the last 15 years with. They had built a life together, and he had no reason to believe that today would be any different from all the other mornings they had shared. The sound of small footsteps on the wooden floor snapped him from his thoughts. Their 2 children, Kaylee and Chloe, were already awake. Kaylee, the older of the 2, always seemed to be bursting with energy and curiosity. Chloe, on the other hand, was more reserved, a gentle soul with a heart full of love. Both girls were already starting their day, chattering excitedly as they prepared for school. Trevor couldn't help but feel a wave of contentment wash over him as he listened to their voices drift through the house. He got up, dressed, and made his way downstairs to the kitchen, where he prepared a simple breakfast: pancakes with syrup, scrambled eggs, and fresh orange juice. The house was filled with the comforting sense of home-cooked food, and as the family gathered around the table, they exchanged their usual pleasantries. They talked about school, work, and the mundane details of life. Nothing out of the ordinary. Everything felt perfect. But as Trevor sat at the table, his eyes drifted to the kitchen counter, where Jade's phone lay unattended. It was strange, but for some reason he felt an inexplicable pull to it. He had never been the type to pry into Jade's personal space, but today was different. There was a curiosity, a subtle nagging feeling at the back of his mind that he couldn't ignore. He picked up the phone, his fingers brushing over the screen as he unlocked it. At first, he didn't see anything out of the ordinary: messages from friends, reminders for appointments, nothing that seemed alarming. But then one message caught his eye. It was from a man named Derek. Trevor's heart skipped a beat as he read the text. I can't believe how much I miss you, Jade. It's been hard to stay away. I can't wait to see you again. Trevor's hand froze, his mind struggling to comprehend what he was reading. He felt a cold shiver run down his spine. Who was Derek? Why was Jade exchanging such intimate messages with him? His thoughts raced and a heavy feeling settled in his chest. His mind whirled with confusion, but the unsettling feeling in his gut pushed him to act. His fingers trembled as he scrolled through the conversation, each new message more damning than the last. I love you. I can't stop thinking about you. The texts were unmistakable. Jade had been seeing someone else behind his back. Trevor's stomach turned as the reality of the situation began to sink in. How had he not seen this coming? How had Jade hidden this from him for so long? For the first time in years, his world felt like it was unraveling. As he stood there holding the phone in his trembling hands, his mind raced. Should he confront her now? Wait for her to wake up? Or pretend nothing had changed, bury the truth, and continue living in blissful ignorance? But Trevor couldn't do that. The pain in his chest was too real, too sharp to ignore. He had to face it, had to confront her with what he had just discovered. His heart told him one thing, but his mind screamed for action. He walked back upstairs, the weight of the phone in his hand feeling heavier with each step. He stopped in the doorway of their bedroom, staring at Jade's sleeping form. For a moment he just watched her, wondering how things had come to this. Was this how his life would be forever, haunted by lies and betrayal? Finally he stepped forward, shaking her gently awake. Jade, we need to talk, he said, his voice trembling. Jade blinked up at him, still groggy from sleep, but there was something in his tone, something that made her sit up immediately. What's wrong, Trevor? She asked, her voice still soft, confused. He handed her the phone without saying a word. As her eyes skimmed the messages, her face turned pale, her hand trembling as she dropped the phone onto the bed. She didn't speak for a long moment, and Trevor's heart pounded in his chest. The silence between them was suffocating. Finally Jade spoke, her voice barely a whisper. Trevor, I'm so sorry. I never wanted you to find out this way. Her words felt hollow, like they were just meant to fill the space between them, but they couldn't erase the betrayal that hung heavy in the room. Trevor's chest tightened with hurt, and he fought back the wave of tears that threatened to overtake him. How long, Jade? How long has this been going on? Jade didn't answer right away. Her eyes filled with guilt as she looked away. It's been a few months, she admitted, her voice cracking. I didn't want to hurt you. I didn't know what I was doing. Trevor's world seemed to tilt, the room spinning as the weight of her confession hit him like a freight train. He had loved her. He had trusted her. And now, everything was broken. Without a word, Trevor turned and walked out of the room, the sound of his footsteps echoing in the hallway as Jade's voice called after him, pleading for him to stay. He didn't stop. Trevor stood in the living room, his chest heaving with a mix of disbelief and anger. The phone still lay heavy in his hand, its screen now cracked under the weight of truth. The once perfect family he had worked so hard to build now felt like an illusion, shattered in an instant. He couldn't shake the image of Jade lying there, so unassuming, while she hid this dark secret from him for months. His mind raced. How could she do this? How could Jade betray him like this with someone named Derek? The very foundation of their relationship, everything they had built together, seemed like it was crumbling before his eyes. He could hear Jade's voice from upstairs, her cries and apologies echoing through the house, but nothing she said could repair the damage that had been done. Kaylee and Chloe were downstairs, oblivious to the storm raging in the house. They were still young, still innocent, still full of hope and joy. Trevor didn't want to shatter that for them, not yet. But how could he protect them from this? How could he shield them from the truth that their mother had betrayed their father in such a cruel way? He took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. He knew what he had to do, but it felt impossible. The pain was overwhelming, the weight of the decision heavier than he had ever imagined. His thoughts flashed to the happy moments they had shared, family vacations, birthdays, quiet evenings spent together. Had it all been a lie? Jade's footsteps echoed down the stairs, and before Trevor could process it, she appeared in the doorway, her eyes red from crying. "Trevor, please," she whispered, her voice full of desperation. "I'm so sorry. I made a mistake. I never wanted to hurt you." Trevor's gaze hardened as he looked at her. "A mistake?" he repeated, his voice thick with emotion. "Jade, this isn't a mistake. You didn't just slip up. You betrayed me. You lied to me for months. You." His words were cut off by the sharp pain in his chest. He couldn't continue, not without breaking down. The anger, the betrayal, the overwhelming grief, everything flooded his mind in that moment. How could she look him in the eyes and say she was sorry when her actions had already torn apart their lives? Jade stepped forward, reaching out a trembling hand toward him. "I know," she said softly, "I know I've ruined everything. But please, Trevor, can we try to fix this? Can we start over?" Trevor recoiled from her touch, the distance between them growing. "No," he said, his voice firm. "I can't do this anymore, Jade. I can't go on pretending like everything's fine. I can't live with the constant doubt, the constant fear of what you might be hiding." Jade's face crumpled as if his words had struck her like a physical blow. She sank onto the couch, her hands clasped together tightly in her lap, her face pale. "Please," she whispered again, "please don't leave me. We've been through so much together. I love you. I didn't mean for any of this to happen." Trevor stood motionless, his mind reeling. He could feel his heart breaking with every word she said, but the damage had already been done. The trust, the one thing that held their marriage together, was gone. And once it was gone, there was no getting it back. "I loved you, Jade," Trevor said, his voice soft but resolute. "But love isn't enough when there's no trust. I can't be with someone who lied to me, who hid this from me for so long. I can't do this anymore." The silence in the room felt suffocating. Jade's tears fell silently as she stared at the floor, her body trembling with grief. Trevor could see the pain in her eyes, but it didn't change the fact that the woman he had trusted for so many years had broken that trust in the most painful way possible. Finally he spoke, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside him. "I'm filing for divorce, Jade. I can't live like this. And I'm getting full custody of the girls. They deserve to grow up in a home where they can trust both of their parents, not in a house full of lies and deception." Jade's breath hitched, her face paling at his words. "Trevor, please," she begged. "I'll do anything. Please don't take them from me." Trevor's eyes softened for a moment, but his resolve remained unshaken. "I'm doing this for them, Jade. They deserve better than this. I deserve better than this. And you need to find a way to make things right for yourself. I can't fix you. Only you can do that." He turned and walked toward the door, leaving Jade sobbing behind him. As he stepped outside, the cool air hit his face like a slap. He felt numb, as though everything in his world had suddenly shifted, leaving him standing in the ruins of his marriage. But even in his pain, Trevor knew he had made the right decision. He had chosen himself. And he had chosen his daughters. No matter how much it hurt, this was the only way forward. The weeks that followed were a blur for Trevor. The pain of the divorce, the constant legal battles, and the heart-wrenching decisions he had to make filled every waking moment. He had always been a man of routine, someone who thrived on order and stability, but now nothing felt certain anymore. He was no longer a husband, no longer part of the family he had built. And in his place was a man who was learning day by day how to navigate a life without Jade. The house, which had once been filled with laughter, warmth, and the hum of family life, now felt eerily quiet. Trevor had moved into the guest bedroom, away from the space that once belonged to them both. His mind kept circling back to the memories of their life together, the moments of joy that now seemed distant and unreachable. He could no longer look at their wedding photos without feeling a sharp pang of sorrow. How had things gone so wrong? But even amidst the sadness, Trevor's primary focus was Kaylee and Chloe. He knew he had to protect them, to shield them from the fallout of the divorce. He couldn't let them see him fall apart. They needed stability. They needed a father who could hold it together, who could be their rock when everything else was crumbling. Every day he made an effort to maintain a sense of normalcy for them. He woke them up for school, helped with their homework, took them to their after-school activities. But behind the facade of a dutiful father, Trevor was struggling. The emotional weight of what had happened, the feeling of betrayal, and the exhaustion from the constant legal proceedings all weighed heavily on him. He was drowning, but he couldn't let them see it. And then there were the nights. The nights were the hardest. When everything was quiet and the house was still, Trevor found himself haunted by the silence that filled the space where Jade had once been. He couldn't escape the memories of their life together, the good ones, the ones that now felt like a distant dream. And there, in the silence of the night, the questions would creep in. What if Jade had truly changed? What if she was sorry? What if they could have worked it out? But these thoughts were fleeting. Trevor had already made his decision, and deep down, he knew it was the right one. There was no going back. One evening, after a particularly exhausting day, Trevor sat at the kitchen table, his head in his hands. He had just put the girls to bed and was trying to sort through the papers for the upcoming custody hearing. The weight of the paperwork was overwhelming, and the pressure was starting to get to him. Just as he was about to call it a night, his phone buzzed on the counter. He glanced at it, his heart skipping a beat when he saw Jade's name on the screen. For a moment, Trevor hesitated. He hadn't spoken to Jade in weeks, not since the day he had told her he was filing for divorce. He had been focused solely on the girls, on moving forward with his life. But something about seeing her name, seeing her reach out, pulled at him. He didn't know if he was ready for this, but he knew he had to face it. He picked up the phone and answered. Trevor, Jade's voice was shaky as if she had been crying. I need to see you. Please, can we talk? Trevor closed his eyes, taking a deep breath. The last thing he wanted to do was revisit the pain of their past, but he knew this conversation was inevitable. What do you want, Jade? He asked, his voice neutral, but the hurt still lingered. I know I've hurt you, she said, her voice full of regret. And I know I can't undo what I've done. But I've been going to therapy. I'm trying to change, trying to be better. I want to show you that I'm not the person I was. Please just let me talk to you. For once, let me explain. Trevor's heart pounded in his chest, torn between wanting to believe her and the deep sense of betrayal that still held him captive. He had spent so many nights wishing that things could have been different, that their marriage could have survived. But he had learned that the truth was never as simple as he had once believed. I don't know if I can trust you again, Jade, he replied, the pain in his voice unmistakable. I don't know if I can ever go back to what we had. There was a long pause on the other end of the line before Jade spoke again, her voice softer. I'm not asking you to go back, Trevor. I'm asking for a chance to show you that I can change. I'm not asking for your forgiveness, but I am asking for your understanding. Please, just let me show you that I'm working on myself. Trevor's mind raced as he processed her words. He had been so consumed with the pain of the betrayal, so focused on his own hurt, that he had never stopped to think about Jade's side of things. He didn't know if he was ready to open himself up to her again, but he also didn't want to shut the door completely. For Kaylee and Chloe's sake, he knew that they would have to find a way to co-parent, to work together in some capacity. He didn't want to be consumed by the bitterness of the past. Okay, Trevor finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. We'll talk. But only for the sake of the girls. Jade's voice broke slightly with relief. Thank you, Trevor. I promise I'm not asking for more than that. I just need to show you that I can be the person you need me to be. As Trevor hung up the phone, a wave of exhaustion washed over him. He had no idea what would come from this conversation with Jade. Part of him feared that reopening this wound would only bring more pain, but another part of him wanted to believe that perhaps there was a way to heal, if not for their marriage, then for the sake of their family. The journey ahead would be long and uncertain. But for the first time in weeks, Trevor felt a glimmer of hope, hope that, despite everything, they could find a way to move forward, to heal and to rebuild their lives, even if it was no longer together. The days following Trevor's conversation with Jade were filled with a mixture of anticipation and anxiety. He couldn't quite shake the feeling that something was about to change, but he had no idea what direction that change would take. Would this be a new beginning for them, or just another painful chapter in a story that was already too far gone? The evening finally arrived when they were scheduled to meet. Trevor had spent the entire day pacing, preparing himself for the conversation that he knew would be uncomfortable, perhaps even agonizing. He still wasn't sure what he expected from Jade, whether it would be more apologies, more excuses, or if she was genuinely ready to make amends for the damage she had done. Trevor had arranged to meet her at a quiet cafe in the neighborhood, a neutral place where they wouldn't be distracted by the pressures of home or the heavy weight of their past. As he walked through the door of the cafe, he spotted Jade sitting at a corner table. She was staring down at her hands, her face drawn with exhaustion, but there was something different about her, something that made him pause. Was it the vulnerability in her eyes? Or perhaps the way she held herself, no longer the confident woman he had known, but someone humbled, someone who seemed to be questioning everything she once believed? He approached the table and for a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence was thick with all the unspoken words and unresolved emotions that lingered between them. Finally, Jade looked up, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. "Trevor," she whispered, her voice shaky. "Thank you for agreeing to meet me. I know it must be hard for you." Trevor took a seat across from her, his gaze steady, but his heart was a mess of conflicting emotions. "It's hard, Jade," he said quietly. "I won't lie to you. But I also know we have to figure out how to move forward for the sake of the girls." Jade nodded, her hands trembling as she wrapped them around the warm cup of tea in front of her. "I know," she said softly. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said. About how you can't just forgive me, how we can't just go back to what we had. I understand that now. I know I can't undo the hurt I caused, and I don't expect you to just forget it. But I want you to know that I'm working on myself. I'm going to therapy, I'm doing everything I can to understand why I did what I did, and I want to be a better person, whether you can ever forgive me or not." Trevor listened, his eyes fixed on her as she spoke. Part of him wanted to believe her, wanted to hear that she was genuinely remorseful and ready to make things right. But the other part of him, the part that had been hurt so deeply by her betrayal, couldn't let go of the doubts that lingered in his mind. Could Jade really change? Could she truly become the person she was claiming to be? Or was this just another act, another layer of deception meant to pull him back into a relationship that had already fallen apart? "I don't know if I can forgive you yet, Jade," Trevor admitted, his voice raw with honesty. "I don't know if I ever will. But I need you to understand something. I'm doing this for the girls. I'm doing this because we have to find a way to be civil with each other. We need to figure out how to co-parent, how to give them the love and stability they deserve. And that means putting our issues aside for now." Jade's face softened at his words and she nodded slowly. "I understand. I'm willing to do whatever it takes. I don't want to be the woman who hurt you. I don't want to be the person who broke this family apart. But I also know that I can't change overnight. And I can't make everything right. All I can do is keep working on myself and hope that one day you'll see that I'm trying. Not just for you but for myself too." The air between them was still heavy, but something had shifted. Trevor could feel it, a subtle change, a hint of possibility. Maybe they couldn't go back to the way things were, but perhaps they could build something new. Not as a married couple but as co-parents, as people who could learn to work together despite the pain that had once separated them. After a long pause, Trevor sighed and leaned back in his chair. "I'm willing to try, Jade. For the girls. Let's take it one step at a time. But know that it's going to take time. And I'm not making any promises. We both have a lot of healing to do." Jade's eyes filled with gratitude as she reached across the table, her hand resting lightly on his. "Thank you, Trevor," she whispered. "That's all I'm asking for. A chance to prove to you that I can be the person you need me to be. A chance to be the mother my girls deserve." Trevor didn't pull his hand away. He wasn't sure what would come of this new chapter, but for the first time in months he felt like there was a way forward. It wasn't going to be easy and it wasn't going to happen overnight, but he was willing to give it a shot. For the sake of Kaylee and Chloe. For the sake of their future. As they sat there talking about their plans for co-parenting, Trevor felt a weight slowly lift off his shoulders. The road ahead was uncertain, and the scars from the past would never fully fade, but he knew that they had to move forward, no matter how difficult it would be. There was no going back to what had been, but perhaps, just perhaps, they could build something new. Weeks turned into months and Trevor and Jade found themselves settling into a new kind of routine. It wasn't the same as before, not by any means, but it was something they could build upon even if it was fragile. Co-parenting wasn't easy, but they were trying. Trevor made sure to keep communication open, to be as civil as possible for the sake of Kaylee and Chloe. The girls were adjusting too, although it wasn't without its challenges. Kaylee, the older of the two, seemed to carry the weight of their broken family on her shoulders. She had always been perceptive, and the cracks in their relationship didn't go unnoticed. But she didn't talk much about it. Instead, she threw herself into school, her art, anything that could distract her from the pain. Chloe, on the other hand, was more sensitive. She cried often, missing the family they once had, and Trevor's heart broke every time he saw her so hurt. Despite their personal struggles, Trevor remained focused on his role as a father. He made sure the girls felt loved, supported, and above all, safe. It wasn't always easy, and there were moments when the pain of the past threatened to overwhelm him, but he had made a commitment to them, to be strong for them, even when he didn't feel strong himself. Jade, meanwhile, seemed to be sticking to her word. She was attending therapy regularly, working on herself, and it showed. When they communicated about the girls, it was more respectful, more focused. And there were moments, small ones, when Trevor could see that she was trying to change. But he knew he couldn't let his guard down completely, not yet. The past still weighed heavily on him, and trust wasn't something you could rebuild overnight. One afternoon, when Trevor was picking up the girls from Jade's house, Kaylee spoke up from the back seat, her voice uncharacteristically quiet. "Dad," she said, her tone hesitant. "Do you think Mom will ever be the same again?" Trevor glanced in the rearview mirror, meeting her eyes. He could see the uncertainty in her gaze, the confusion that came from trying to make sense of a world that no longer felt solid. He took a deep breath before answering, choosing his words carefully. "I don't know, Kaylee," he said, his voice calm but firm. "But what I do know is that we have to keep moving forward. We can't change the past, but we can choose how we handle the present. Your mom is working on herself, and I'm doing my best to be the dad you need. All we can do is keep trying, one step at a time." Kaylee didn't respond right away, but Trevor could see that she was thinking it over. He didn't expect her to have all the answers. Hell, he didn't have all the answers either. But for now they were getting by. And that was enough. As the weeks continued to pass, Trevor noticed subtle changes in his own life. He was slowly rediscovering parts of himself that had been buried beneath the weight of his failed marriage. He started spending more time with friends, reconnecting with old hobbies he had neglected for years. He found solace in things that had nothing to do with his family or his divorce. Just simple, solitary pleasures that allowed him to reclaim his sense of self. One evening, Trevor found himself sitting on the porch, sipping a cup of coffee and watching the sun set over the horizon. It had become one of his favorite moments of the day, the time when everything was quiet and he could just be alone with his thoughts. As the sky turned shades of pink and orange, Trevor felt a sense of peace that he hadn't experienced in a long time. It was then that Jade called. "Trevor," she said, her voice softer than usual. "I just wanted to let you know. I'm proud of you. And I know the girls are too. I can see how much you're trying and it means a lot to me. I don't know if we'll ever get back to the way things were, but I just wanted you to know that I'm grateful for the way you've handled everything." Trevor was silent for a moment, surprised by the sincerity in her voice. It wasn't something he had expected, not after everything that had happened. But hearing her say those words, hearing her acknowledge the effort he was putting in, stirred something deep inside him. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a step in the right direction. "Thank you, Jade," Trevor replied, his voice steady. "I'm just doing what I have to do. For the girls. For myself." There was a pause on the other end of the line, and when Jade spoke again, her voice was almost a whisper. "I know. And I'll keep trying, Trevor. I promise." For the first time in a long while, Trevor felt something shift inside him. It wasn't a promise of reconciliation or a return to their old life, but it was something more important. Something that had been missing for a long time. Hope. Hope that things could get better, even if they would never be the same. As he hung up the phone and returned to his spot on the porch, Trevor realized that he had come a long way since that fateful day when everything fell apart. The journey had been painful, but it had also taught him valuable lessons about resilience, about the importance of trust, and about the strength it took to rebuild after everything had been shattered. He wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time in months he felt ready to face it. Not as the man he once was, but as someone new, someone who had learned that healing wasn't about forgetting the past, but about finding the strength to move forward, no matter how difficult it might be. Months passed, and Trevor began to feel the weight of the world lifting off his shoulders. The constant turmoil that had consumed him after the divorce slowly gave way to a sense of calm. He still had moments of doubt, moments when the grief and anger from the past bubbled to the surface, but they were becoming less frequent. The process of moving forward, of rebuilding, was slow, but it was happening. Kaylee and Chloe had adjusted, each in her own way. Kaylee had started to open up more, allowing herself to feel the pain instead of bottling it up. She still spent long hours sketching in her room, her art reflecting her inner world. Chloe, more sensitive than ever, had started therapy to work through her feelings. Trevor felt a deep sense of relief knowing that his daughters were getting the help they needed to heal, even if it was a long and difficult journey. Trevor himself had also taken steps to rebuild his own life. He started seeing a therapist to process everything he had gone through, to understand the layers of hurt, betrayal, and loss that had weighed him down for so long. And although he still wasn't sure if he would ever fully forgive Jade, he was learning to let go of the resentment. It wasn't about her anymore, it was about him. About healing, about reclaiming his life and his happiness. One evening, as Trevor sat in the kitchen with a cup of tea, his phone buzzed. It was a message from Jade. Trevor, I know things are better now, and I'm glad we're at least able to co-parent in a civil way. But I was hoping we could talk again. I know I've asked for a lot of your time and patience, but I still want to show you that I'm making progress. Can we meet? I promise it'll be different this time. Trevor stared at the message for a moment, his mind racing. He had thought their conversations had reached a place of mutual understanding, but Jade's message made him pause. Did he need more from her? Was it necessary to meet again? He thought of his daughters and what was best for them. Would this meeting be a step toward better co-parenting? Or was it just another attempt to revisit the past? After a few moments he responded. We can meet. But I want to be clear, this is about moving forward, not backward. For the girls. For all of us. Jade replied quickly, her tone relieved, almost hopeful. Thank you, Trevor. I'll see you tomorrow. The next day, Trevor met Jade at a small park near their neighborhood. The weather was warm, the sky clear, but there was a weight to the moment that neither of them could ignore. They stood a few feet apart at first, awkward in the stillness, neither knowing exactly where to begin. Finally Jade spoke. I've been thinking a lot, she said softly, her eyes meeting his. I don't expect you to forgive me completely, and I don't think we'll ever be able to forget everything. But I wanted to say that I truly regret what I did. I've spent so many nights wishing I could turn back time, wishing I could take back my mistakes. But I can't. All I can do now is show you that I'm better. That I'm learning. That I'm not the person I was. Trevor looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time he didn't feel the anger he had once held so tightly. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was something different. Something that felt like release. I'm not sure if I can ever go back to the way things were, Trevor said, his voice steady. But I believe in second chances. For you, for the girls, for me. We can't change the past, but we can build something better, something stronger moving forward. Jade's eyes filled with tears and she nodded slowly as if she understood. I don't need you to love me again, Trevor. I just need you to trust me. And I know that's going to take time. I can't fix everything overnight, but I will keep working on myself. And if you ever want to talk about anything, really, I'm here. The conversation felt like a final chapter closing, not on their relationship, but on the painful history that had once bound them together. It was a moment of clarity for both of them, understanding that while their past would never be perfect, their future didn't have to be defined by it. As they walked away from the park together, their paths separated by distance but united by the shared responsibility of raising their children, Trevor felt something he hadn't in a long time: peace. He wasn't sure what the future held, whether Jade would truly change, whether he would ever fully trust her again, whether they could co-parent as friends rather than strangers. But for the first time in years he felt a sense of closure. It wasn't about reconciling everything that had gone wrong. It was about accepting what had happened and choosing to move forward anyway. For Kaylee and Chloe. For himself. For the life he was building.